Have you ever sat and thought about what it is that you truly want to do in life, or what it is that you think you're called to do in life? Well, those are really good questions to ask, and I'm sure that many of you listening either know what it is or you've sat and daydreamed about it many, many times and thinking about how you can get out of your mess that you're in now. Well, I am a firm believer, after having lived for a little while and walked with the Lord and just seen life and stuff, that we have everything we need all wrapped up in our DNA and what we've been given when we were sent here to this earth. When we came through our mama's womb, everything was already embedded deep within us. And why do I believe that? Well, there's clues not only in Scripture, but also in the way we think, in the way we operate, and what we dream about. You know, every single person on this planet, at some point or another in their life, starting from a young age, they would sit and daydream about what it would be like to be a prince or a king or a princess, a fireman, a police officer, a nurse, a doctor, whatever it is. They would sit and daydream about it, or they would sit and daydream about having a lot of money and what they would do with that money. And these are things that just keep coming up within us. It doesn't just happen because we're in a traumatic situation and we want to get out of it, whether it's a job we can't stand or just the home life that we've had growing up, and we just want to bail out and anything will take us out and that'll be fine with us out of that situation. It's not just because of that. It's because there's something innately embedded deep within our soul and our spirit that was given to us before we even got here. Jeremiah is a clue to that. Before I formed you in your mother's womb, I knew you and ordained you with a calling. I've ordained you as a prophet to the nations. And then Ephesians 1:5, for he hath ordained us, destined us, planned in love for us to be adopted, revealed as his own children through Christ Jesus. Ephesians 1:11, in him also were made God's heritage portion, and we obtain an inheritance. For we have been foreordained, chosen and appointed beforehand in accordance with his purpose, who works out everything in agreement with the counsel and design of his own will. You know, God is smarter than we make him out to be. He is an all-knowing, omnipotent, omnipresent, everything that we could ever imagine he is. He's that and a million times more. So why wouldn't we think that he has everything packaged within us when we got here? When you talk to some people, they believe that, well, I just, at one point when I've been processed to death and I'm finally killed off, then I'll realize what it is. God will give it to me then. Until then, he's withholding, and he doesn't want me to be a spoiled little baby, so he's withholding until I reach a certain maturity level to find out. Well, that's religion talking, and that's just man-made stuff. And that's our own ideas we come up with. That's not God's heart. Think about it. God is love. The very substance of who he is love that's always radically chasing us down and for us at every moment of every second of every day. And so why in the world would love in its purest form, which is God, want to withhold stuff just to torture us? Now, there is a maturing process. There is a processing we go through, right? But it's not it's something that's individually tailored and it's different for everyone. But it's not something that once we get processed to the point he finally drops in our dream and says, okay, you can do it now. Because after all, you've reached a level of perfection and you're not going to sin anymore. You're not going to make any more mistakes. So I can trust you with this. Here you go. Here's what it is. No. The gifts and calling are irrevocable, and there's clues to what that is from our childhood on up. And so the parent's job is to go in and watch their child diligently and intently to see where they're bent, what they're bent towards doing, and what their calling is. And so train up a child in the way they should go, and when they're old, they won't depart from it. In other words, look and watch your child in the way that they're bent, or what their likes are, what their passion is, and the way they're going in that direction. And then whatever you do, cherish that, nurture that, guide that, help develop that, along with partnership with God. And when they're old, they will not depart from their God-ordained gift and function and purpose in the earth. You know, a lot of times we think that's just spiritually speaking. Well, how can you really separate the spiritual from the natural when your whole life is given to God? When everything about you is wanting Him and His will for your life. So the natural and the supernatural, or the natural and the spirit, are one in us, yet, separated to a degree, but they're still so intertwined that you can't see the difference, that we can't really separate that. And so whatever I'm bent towards, or my child is, and they just are passionate about, whether it's a sport, or they're speaking and they're talking with this wonderful, they're giving stories, and they just have this way about them that captures people when they talk, or they're great at business from a young age. They just have this business mind to come up with all these ideas. Whatever it may be, that right there is where God has foreordained and chosen and appointed them before they ever got here. And that's just beginning to manifest as we draw it out as a parent or authority figure in their life, with somebody who loves them. And so we help draw that out. And how many parents don't do that? They're just unaware. They're just kind of clueless and say, well, God will work it out for them. I'm busy. We all get busy, and we all have busy, with technology. We're going 100 miles an hour. But still, I think it's our responsibility as a parent to nurture and help guide and develop our child to the point to where they take off like a rocket in whatever it is they're called to do. So it's embedded within us, our God designed and divine DNA. And the world, a lot of the New Age community and the world in general, the scientists and everything, really believe that a lot of our behaviors and everything that we do in life links directly back to the DNA. Now, we don't even want to look at it as Christians, because we just say, oh, God will just work it out one day. One day I'm just supposed to suffer for Jesus, and then one day maybe I'll get to go and do something I enjoy. Because after all, I got to suffer it out, just like Jesus did, suffer to reign. And then we forget that He already went to the cross and He paid the price. It's finished, so that we can have a full life doing what we were called to do. 1 Peter says the same thing. It is true that He was chosen, Jesus was chosen and foreordained, destined and foreknown for it before the foundation of the world, but He was brought out to public view, made manifest in these last days, at the end of the times, for the sake of us. Jesus Himself was sent to this planet with a work to do. I must be about my Father's business. Tells his mom, look, Mom, I am busy doing my Father's will. I'll catch up to you. And so at a young age, he knew. And yet he grew in stature, grew in maturity, grew in strength as he went. But he still operated in his gift at a young age. Take, for example, somebody like Carrie Underwood. You know who she is. She went on American Idol, tried out, went skyrocketing all the way to the top, won the thing. Now she's living her dream. She gives glory to God in her interviews and wherever she's at. She even has lyrics giving all the credit to God. And now, at a young age, she was 16 when that happened. And then now she's growing in it. She's growing in maturity. She's growing in stature. She's growing in strength within her gift to the world. No one can deny that woman can't sing and has a singing gift. Now, the religious mind would say, well, yeah, she needs to be in my church singing to the congregation and using that within the four walls of my church. Well, who are you to say that? God is not confined to the four walls of our buildings. He takes someone out and lights them on fire, and they give him glory wherever they're at. What if she's called to infiltrate the entertainment industry in such a way that you and I could never reach? And to show forth the glory of God in what she does within that industry. We can't judge the woman just because she's in Nashville and singing country songs and all that. Regardless of what you think, God is with her, and He's growing her, and He's shining through her for a dark world. And so she is tapping, and she's gone right into the DNA gift, and she's pulled it out by reason of use, and now she's living her dream. She's living God's dream with her. And that may take on many facets. She may grow into being a producer or a filmmaker or rocking Nashville and changing and turning the whole music industry upside down on its head. That's why we can't count anyone out, no matter how they start, what they look like, or what our religious lens tells us they're doing or what they look like. This is why God doesn't confine Himself within the religious minds and the religious boxes we call denominationalism. He's gone way beyond that. Hey, just look at nature, look at anything around us, creation, and you can tell He doesn't stay in a stuffy old box. In fact, He's blowing the doors off and blowing the walls down of much of the religious mindsets in this day and this hour. He's been doing it. He's going to continue to do it. He's going to blow us away with what He does in the future. So how about you? Have you really found out what it is that makes you come alive? Yes, it's Jesus. He is the all in all. He's the number one. But He's ordained us for the work. Each and every one of us separately. I was just having a conversation the other day with somebody about feeding the homeless under the bridge. And I was being very honest and open and transparent with them because we were just talking. Well, he was saying, well, I'm not so sure I'm called to just kind of go down there and minister to those people. I said, thank God other people do it, but I just don't know. And I said, well, let me tell you something. Right now, if I was to go down there, I would and feed the homeless and be under there, it would not fit and it would not work. It may for a little bit, but it's not my passion and it's not my ultimate call. Now, am I called to reach the unsaved? Yes. Am I called to reach those that are in pain and hurting and homeless and not clothed? Yes, but in a different way. Doing what I'm doing right now. Equipping the body in word and teaching and ministering and in writing and doing unusual type of things that are outside of the box. That's my calling. Now, will I be obedient if God says go down there and feed that homeless person on the bridge? Of course. Who wouldn't if you love Him, right? But this is where we need to distinguish between what religion dictates and says, look, you have to go down under that bridge and feed those homeless people in order to win points in heaven, in order to please God, in order to win souls. That is not the way God does things, ultimately. That's what religion does. And yes, of course, it's compassionate and it works to a degree, but there's a difference between somebody literally called to that for a ministry and it burns within them and they're passionate about literally going down under the bridge and feeding the homeless, as compared to a businessman that's called into the white-collar industry, goes into Fortune 500 companies, and blows the doors off of traditionalism in that sense. And shares Christ and reveals kingdom in that way. Or a clothing designer goes and designs clothes for maybe the homeless. And then someone comes and gets them from her or him and distributes them down to the homeless. There's all different parts, like 1 Corinthians 12 and Romans 12 talks about. We are all uniquely and individually called from the cry of what was already put in us in our God-given DNA. There's a pattern there. If you study out DNA in any way, there's patterns that are uniquely designed for each and every individual. That's why we have individual and unique fingerprints. I can't take my fingerprint and put it on yours and match it up 100%. I probably couldn't even do it 5%. They may look similar, but when it all comes down to the nitty-gritty and we get a close-up on it, they are worlds apart. God made us that way so that we would share Him and express Him in millions of different ways. A myriad of different levels and expressions and giftings and talents and abilities. So, take for example, what's really popular right now in the tech world, in the business world, is to focus on how to leverage your strengths in order to monetize or get money, get a lot of money. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's a lot of focus on that right now. But in the church, here's my question. It would be and I don't know, I'm not throwing, I'm not pointing my finger at anyone in particular because there's so much of this going on, so many great people that I know that are involved in it, and I think it's wonderful. But my question would be to throw in once in a while is, where is Christ in the middle of it all? Is Christ actually leading, and is He the focus and is He the expression once you do leverage your strengths and you get into a position of influence? Is He at the forefront? Is he the focus? And it doesn't have to mean Christianese. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about, are we expressing the life and the nature and the character of Christ in everything we do? Is He leading to open the doors to give us effortless favor in situations so that we're not wringing our hands and stressing out and sweating and toiling the whole way? Because there's such similarities between what my believing friends are doing in that arena and those that are in the world, and they're just going for it for the dollar sign. There's a lot of parallels. There's a lot of similarities. And that's good. Those things can be great, except the focus. And if we're doing it all out for Christ, He's going to reward us anyways, right? If we're lifting Him up and He's the focus, then wonderful. But I just like to throw that question in there once in a while to keep people, oh yeah, that's the reason why I'm doing this. It's not for money. Because the truth of the matter is, unless we get the root of what we really love in this world, like money, yanked out of us like a deep-seated root, and then the soil shaken off and the weed thrown out, called the love of money, the passion for money, unless we do, then we always have these hidden motives to do things for money because we're trying to get out of our poverty mentality and our mindset. And so if we're not careful, we just focus on that, and then we call it God. I know, because I've been there, done that, wore the t-shirt, took it outside, put lighter fluid on it, and burned that sucker and watched it go up in flames. And so there's a lot of that happening, and not just in that arena, but in business in general, the marketplace. Why? Because you know as well as I do that Christians, poor Christians, we've all been there, get sick and tired of being poor. And so we think, well, we got to do something. We got to engineer and manufacture something that's going to make us some money here. And so why not jump on this bandwagon? Now, there's a difference. Again, just hear my heart. If you're called to that, you'll know it. It'll come effortless, and you'll always keep Christ in the right place. Right? You're in love with Him. You're saturated with Him. He means everything to you, and you'll give it up in a heartbeat if He says to. So there's one thing if it's in your DNA and you're wrapped around it and you cannot escape it, it's all you think about in a good way. There's a difference between that and then someone just running after it because it's the popular thing to do. When they speak, they're not anointed. They stumble over everything, and everything they touch is not working out. So then when it doesn't work out, they call it the devil, and they're always fighting and scratching and clawing for their next buck or their next deal or their next relationship appointment or their divine appointment, whatever you want to call it. So they're always fighting for those things like an orphan, instead of being a true son and being led by the Spirit of God. I tell you what, favor and effortless flow comes to those that are led completely by the love of their life. We know this. I'm just encouraging you and reiterating it and reminding you that that is the truth of what God wants to do in us and for us. Our inheritance is jointly given with Jesus. We know that. So if it's jointly given, it's not just singly given. In other words, they're not separated, saying, okay, Jesus, you get this, you go your own way, and now you're a child of God, you have an inheritance, now you kind of go your own way. No, we're so one with Jesus, you can't tell the difference when you pour them together. Just like food coloring and water, you can't tell it. We are that one with Him, and so naturally, we let the strong one lead. We let the intelligent, wise, all-knowing one lead us so that we can walk through with seemingly sweatless and toilless efforts about us. So why not let Him lead? Why not let Him be the King of all? Why not let Him get all the glory? If He's going to make it a lot easier on us. Because remember, He kicked all of the sweat out of living on the cross. Whether we believe it or realize it or not, it's the life likened unto Adam had in the garden, where he lived with a sweatless nature and everything was already provided for him. So how do we understand, or how do we move into this kind of life? Well, first it begins with that being just enamored and captivated by His love. And then when that is free-flowing and you're walking in that relationship, then He begins to give us clues of what it is that He's called us for and what He's chosen us for individually. And then out of that, we begin to take steps and on purpose direction that we're given, we take steps in that direction. And once we do, we begin to see the DNA come alive and begin to work with favor. We get divine appointments. There's relationships that are formed that come out of nowhere. We begin to get the funding we need when we put our hands to it. Because when we put our hands to it, there's something about that attraction that comes to the DNA that was ordained to be with that particular, the DNA inside of you. It's like DNA calling to other DNA to come join with you and partner with you in your call, no matter what it is. And it has everything to do with our natural gifts as well as our spiritual gifts. It's not just about the fivefold ministry. And I'm going to do a whole separate thing on that, about the gifts in Ephesians 4. But it's not, this whole thing is not just for the five gifts, the fivefold. The pastors, the teachers, the apostles, the evangelists, and the pastor. We all know that. And it's all been focused on them for so long, I know. It's kind of heartbreaking, isn't it? And what about the rest of the body that has all of these other tremendous gifts? Well, that focus is beginning to happen now, where we are going to see this stuff come to light. We're going to see it come to the forefront and surface in a way that we haven't before, where there's going to be the focus on the people and then igniting what God has given them within their DNA and then calling that forth to the surface and then doing everything we can to surround them, to empower them with the Lord's power to go out and to shine forth who He is. Whether it's starting a sewing factory, an auto mechanic shop, being a doctor, a lawyer, a teacher, a stay-at-home mom that raises all these wonderful kids, being a golfer, a sports person, or whatever it is that you're bent towards in the natural and the spiritual, it's one, remember. And then when you're passionate and you are coming alive and living the dream, of course you're going to share Christ. He's going to emanate and flow through the happy, content, joyful individual. There's nothing different. I'm not talking about anything different than what's already in the Bible. Samuel goes to Saul and says, look, the Lord has chosen you. You have in your DNA the calling of a king to govern, to rule, to administrate, whether you believe it or not, whether you've seen it or not. I'm calling it forth from the inside of you to the surface so that you can see it. The same with Nehemiah and Jeremiah and Isaiah, on down the line. The disciples, they were fishermen. Their gift was fishing businesses, right? If it was something else, God would have said it. Look, okay, you guys, I've chose my 11 or my 12 from the auto mechanic pool. I chose them from the farm. It would have been written that way. No, he decided to choose fishermen. The ultimate reason, we don't know yet until we get to heaven. It doesn't matter. Their gift was fishing. So they went and they were fishers of men now. So they went out and they used the same kind of natural principles in order to bring people in the Spirit. And we haven't seen all the little details throughout Scripture to know exactly what that looked like. But I guarantee you they were using a lot of the analogies and a lot of the things that they learned in order to win people and to show who Christ was. So they're called out as the fivefold ministry, and his disciples, his chosen 12, right? Until one of them went sideways. But the idea is that he calls some. He gave gifts to some to be the five. And all the rest, we're going to find out real soon what that looks like in the church worldwide. I personally am called to help ignite that within individuals, bring it to the surface, show them what the process looks like, call out what they are by words of knowledge, and then watch them burn for the Lord. That's what burns in me. My passion is to see you live yours. That's my mission statement. That's what burns me. That's what I always talk about. That's what whenever I'm with somebody, we wind up in conversation. It always wraps around that somehow, some way. I'm passionate about it. Why? Because it's been put in my DNA from the beginning of time. I didn't always see it that way, but now it makes sense because from my childhood, I never really knew what it was I was supposed to do. And I would always cry out to God, and that part of this is in my book, Flowing in the Unforced Rhythms of Your Destiny. If you don't have a copy, get one. And I mentioned some of this, that my thing was that I always wanted to know what it was. And I asked God, if you just show me, I will do it with everything in me. I'll do it with a passion. I'll do it with abandonment. I just need to know, because I was so distraught and frustrated about not knowing. So I get these jobs that I couldn't stand. And then people were wondering, what's wrong with you? Why can't you, just work the job like everybody else and just be happy the rest of your life? Why don't you just retire from that place, work there 30, 40 years? And I'd say, no, that's death to me. That is misery to me. And every time I think about that, I want to throw up. But at the same time, somebody else would say, man, that's my dream to do that. Well, for me, I've soon discovered, well, not soon, but it took a while, that my calling was to go and be around it, because there would be people that come into my life that would be the same thing. Man, what's my calling? I don't know. I'm frustrated. And so then I would wind up counseling with them, and then the Lord would give me the answers, much of the time, or at least in part, to help those individuals. And so guess what? Year after year after year, these people keep coming to me asking those questions. And I love it, because now I know my passion, I've discovered my passion, is to help other people come out of the control or out of the frustration and depression and oppression and get into true freedom by living their DNA calling. And so whatever it is for you, it's going to look different. And maybe you have a similar calling, because there's going to be much need of this message going around the world in short order, because it's right here, right now. God has put his finger on it, and he is speaking this loud and clear. And there's some people doing it, and they're spreading the message, but not enough. And those that are truly called and chosen for this, they're going to write about it, they're going to sing about it, they're going to preach about it, they're going to teach about it, they're going to have businesses hosting this. Training centers are going to pop up around the world that are going to focus on the natural gifts as well as the spiritual, and they're going to see people come alive in their calling. How many people out there right now are called into the computer industry, and yet they just think it's a job? They just think, well, this is my job, I need to be a pastor. Well, if you're not called to be a pastor, then don't be a pastor. If you're not called into the ministry, then the worst thing you can do is go and try to be in the ministry full time. If you love computers and you think about them and you talk about them all the time, you're passionate, you're always looking at the latest technology, and all you do all day long is you're sitting on your computer and it seems effortless for you, it doesn't make you sweat, it doesn't make you strive, it doesn't make you stress, then guess what? Most likely, that's your calling in some way with computers. So then you would ask the Lord, okay, hone me in. Focus me with razor-sharp precision into the area of computers you want me to be in, and before you know it, you'll start being led in that direction. That's how it works. But see, we've been told in the church that these are natural gifts. It doesn't make any sense. Just it's your job, and then your real calling is to be an evangelist or a pastor or a teacher. Well, we all know what happens to a teacher when they stand up and they open their mouth when they're not called to do it, and it's a disaster. But they force it because they just think, well, my pastor or somebody in my family told me this is what I was supposed to do. Or the Bible says, fivefold. I want to reach the highest levels in Christendom, so I'm just going to do this. And then it's kind of like the singing shows, American Idol and all the rest, X Factor. When somebody gets up there to sing, and then Simon Cowell says, "Who told you could sing?" And then the poor little girl or the guy says, "Well, my mom." Well, of course your mom's going to tell you that you can sing. Every mom says that your child can sing when they open their mouth because they love them. They don't tell the truth all the time, but they love them. And so I love it. Simon goes, "Look, you just need to go do something else because this isn't it, honey." And we need to get honest with ourselves, with God, and with our influence. Whoever it is that's surrounding us, whether it's a church or a business, we need to get honest with the people that ask us and confide in us, or they start doing something that's going sideways in the workplace, and you're like, "Whoa, maybe I hired the wrong person for this position. I don't know. I need to investigate." But yet instead we just say, "Well, do you like doing that?" "Oh yeah, I like doing it." "Okay, well we'll just work with it." And then year after year goes by and everything keeps going downhill. And then you wonder why everybody's leaving your church or everybody's leaving the business, because you've got one or two people that are completely out of place and dislodged, and they're making everything a mess around them. Chaos surrounds, confusion surrounds, and we know God's not the author of it. So who is the author of it? What's happening? So this is where we get honest. And we sit them down, say if you're the boss at work, and this sweet little old lady is she's in the computer department and she's just messing up at every turn, and you're like, "Okay, tell me what's going on." "Oh, it's a nightmare at home, and my husband, my children, my grandchildren, and I'm losing sleep, and I just don't know what I'm doing at work. I'm just confused." Say, "Okay, all right, well, that's understandable. Everybody has problems, but is that really what it is? Or do you find yourself hitting a wall every time you sit down at that computer? Did you really just get this job because of the money? Is that what it is, honey? Or are you just having a bad week?" These are the questions we need to ask. And it all starts in the recruiting process, right? I think the whole hiring process for a company and for a choir or whatever it is we need to turn it upside down on its head and ask the right questions. Dig. I call it, they call it in the industry, in the selling industry, discovery. The discovery phase. Well, they tell you discover until you can't discover anymore. What does that mean? Discovering their needs, their wants, and their desires. And so that's all part of it. So anyway, that's part of the whole discovery phase. And when that happens, then we find out what's really going on and whether they like to actually do that, they're passionate about it, or they're not. They're just doing it for the dollar sign or just because their family said, well, this looks good and this is what you should do. So it's so important that we realize, ask the right questions as a boss, ask the right questions as a leader or an influencer, so that we can get down to the core of what their DNA is saying and what their real calling is. Once we do that, then we can guide them in the direction that they need to go. And then with the Lord's help, we can all come together and say, okay, is this where we're going? Is this where we need to be? So that you can flourish in what God has for you. Okay, I'm going to leave it off right there, and we will pick this up again to continue on with this, because I think there's a lot more to discover and to dig around this area. So this will be part 1 of the DNA message. We'll talk soon.